In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And on the derelict Imperial ship known as the Wrath of Espandor, that war has taken a particularly horrifying turn. This vessel, once a proud symbol of Imperial might, has become a tomb ship drifting through the void, infested with one of the galaxy's most terrifying threats. The Tyranids have claimed it, and what transpired within its corrupted halls represents one of the most intense and claustrophobic encounters that the Ultramarines have faced in recent memory. The Wrath of Espandor wasn't always a floating nightmare. This ship served the Imperium with distinction for centuries, carrying out the Emperor's will across countless war zones. It was a vessel of war, designed to deliver the Emperor's wrath upon his enemies, and its crew numbered in the thousands. But when the Tyranid Hive Fleet descended upon the Avarax system, everything changed. The ship became caught in the crossfire of an alien invasion so vast and so consuming that entire worlds were being stripped of all biological matter. The Reclamation update for Space Marine 2 brings players face to face with the aftermath of this catastrophe. When Lieutenant Titus and his battle brothers receive orders to board the Wrath of Espandor, they know they're walking into a death trap. Intelligence reports are sparse, but what little information has been gathered paints a terrifying picture. The ship's Vox systems have gone dark, its Geller fields are failing, and worst of all, biosignatures indicate massive Tyranid presence throughout the vessel. The mission parameters are deceptively simple on paper. Board the ship, locate any surviving Imperial personnel or valuable equipment, gather intelligence on the Tyranid infestation, and if possible, purge the Xenos threat. But as any Space Marine knows, simplicity in the briefing room often translates to absolute hell in the field. The Wrath of Espandor has become a hunting ground, and the Tyranids have had time to establish themselves, to breed, to multiply, and to turn every corridor into a potential ambush point. As the Thunderhawk approaches the derelict vessel, the true scale of the horror becomes apparent. The ship's hull is damaged in multiple locations, great rents torn in the armor plating that would have taken sustained weapons fire or something far worse to create. Organic matter clings to the exterior in several places, the telltale signs of Tyranid corruption spreading like a cancer across the Imperial ship's surface. This isn't just an infestation, this is a transformation. The Tyranids are in the process of claiming this vessel as their own, incorporating it into their biomass. The boarding action itself is tense and methodical. Space Marines are trained for every conceivable combat scenario, but fighting Tyranids in close quarters aboard a ship presents unique challenges. The Xenos can come from anywhere, bursting through walls, dropping from ventilation shafts, or swarming up through damaged decking. There's no safe corner, no secure position. Every shadow could hide a Hormigaunt. Every darkened corridor could contain a warrior organism. And somewhere in the depths of the ship, something far worse is waiting. The interior of the Wrath of Espandor tells a story of desperate last stands and overwhelming horror. Evidence of the crew's final moments is everywhere. Barricades hastily erected and then torn apart. Weapons fire scarring the walls. And the bodies. The Tyranids rarely leave bodies behind, consuming all biological matter to fuel their endless hunger. But here and there the Space Marines find remnants. A hand still clutching a lasgun. Armor pieces from Imperial Guard units that were stationed aboard. These small details paint a picture of the terror that unfolded when the Tyranids breached the hull. The ship's layout has become a maze of death. What were once orderly decks and compartments have been compromised by Tyranid bioforms that have literally reshaped portions of the interior. Organic growths pulse with alien life. Strange resin-like substances coat the walls, and the air itself is thick with spores and alien pheromones. The Space Marines' auto-senses are constantly adjusting, filtering out toxins and analyzing threats. But even with all their enhanced physiology and advanced armor systems, the environment itself is hostile. One of the most chilling aspects of exploring the Wrath of Espandor is the sound design. Or rather, the strategic use of silence punctuated by horror. The ship groans and creaks as its structure continues to fail. Somewhere in the distance, screeching alien calls echo through the corridors. The skittering of claws on metal. The wet, organic sounds of tyrannid bioforms moving through the ship. And then, just when tension reaches its peak, the silence. The complete and total absence of sound that signals a predator is stalking its prey. The tyrannids aboard the Wrath of Espandor represent multiple stages of the hive mind's infestation strategy. The initial breach would have been carried out by fast-moving shock troops, hormagaunts and termagants designed to overwhelm defenders through sheer numbers and ferocity. Once these lesser bioforms established a foothold, larger organisms would have followed. Tyrannid warriors, towering monsters that combine the killing power of multiple lesser organisms with a direct synaptic link to the hive mind itself. These creatures don't just fight, they coordinate, they adapt, they learn from every engagement. But the true terror lurking aboard the Wrath of Espandor is the presence of a tyrannid prime. This is not just another warrior organism. A tyrannid prime represents the hive mind's alpha predator, a creature evolved and enhanced to be the perfect killing machine. Standing taller than even a space marine in full armor, armed with weapons grown from its own biology that can tear through ceramite like paper, and possessing an intelligence that allows it to not only coordinate swarms of lesser organisms, but to anticipate enemy tactics and counter them. The Tyrannid Prime is a nightmare made flesh. Its exoskeleton is layered with chitinous plates thick enough to deflect bolter rounds. Its limbs end in massive scything talons or crushing claws, capable of ripping a human in half with casual ease. Some primes are equipped with devourer weapons, living guns that fire volleys of borer beetles or flesh hooks. Others wield boneswords, psychically charged blades that can drain the life force from their victims. And all of them possess a connection to the hive mind so strong that they can continue coordinating attacks even if cut off from the main swarm. Encountering a Tyrannid Prime aboard the Wrath of Espandor is not a matter of if, but when. The creature has claimed the ship as its territory, using it as a breeding ground and staging area. Every space marine who boards this vessel is being watched, evaluated, hunted by an intelligence that has consumed the genetic memories of thousands of species. The Prime knows human tactics because it has digested human brains. It understands Imperial ship layouts because it has infiltrated dozens of such vessels. And it is absolutely dedicated to killing anything that threatens the swarm. The combat encounters throughout the Wrath of Espandor showcase the brutal effectiveness of Tyrannid assault tactics. Small groups of termagants and hormagaunts probe defenses, testing reactions, and forcing the Space Marines to expend ammunition. Then, just when it seems the attack has been repelled, larger organisms strike from unexpected angles. A Tyrannid warrior bursts through a wall. A lictor, a stealth organism so perfectly adapted for ambush that it can become nearly invisible, drops from the ceiling. The attacks are relentless and coordinated, each wave softening the defenders for the next assault. The Space Marines must utilize every weapon in their arsenal to survive. Bolters roar in the confined spaces, each explosive shell finding alien flesh and detonating with devastating effect. Chainswords scream as they bite into chitin and bone. Plasma weapons superheat the air, turning Tyrannid bioforms into smoking ruins. And when ammunition runs low, there are always the close combat weapons, the power fists and thunder hammers that can crush alien skulls with the Emperor's wrath behind every blow. But weapons alone are not enough aboard the Wrath of Espandor. The Space Marines must think tactically, using the ship's environment to their advantage. Choke points become defensive positions. Blast doors that still function can be sealed to slow the swarm. Environmental hazards, from explosive fuel cells to failing plasma conduits, can be turned into improvised weapons. And sometimes, the best tactic is simply to move, to keep pushing forward rather than becoming bogged down in a war of attrition that the Tyrannids will always win through sheer numbers. The mission objectives evolve as the Space Marines penetrate deeper into the ship. Initial goals of reconnaissance and recovery become secondary to survival and extraction. But along the way, valuable intelligence is gathered. Data slates containing the ship's logs reveal the timeline of the Tyranid attack. Security footage, corrupted but partially recoverable, shows the initial breaches and the desperate defense mounted by the crew. And most importantly, evidence is found of the Tyranid Prime's presence and its role in coordinating the infestation. One of the most atmospheric sections of the Wrath of Espandor operation takes place in the ship's Engineerium. This massive chamber, once filled with the thrumming power of plasma reactors and warp drives, has been transformed into an alien nest. Organic matter coats every surface. Strange pod-like structures pulse with embryonic bioforms. And in the center of it all, feeding on the ship's remaining power sources, is a massive Tyranid organism that serves as a living battery for the swarm. The Engineerium battle is a multi-phase encounter that tests every skill the Space Marines possess. Initial waves of lesser organisms must be cleared while avoiding damage to critical systems that could cause a plasma breach. Then the larger bioforms emerge, Tyranid warriors and carnifexes that use the chamber's vertical space to attack from multiple angles. And finally, the objective becomes clear. Destroy the central organism to disrupt the Tyranid power network and potentially cripple their ability to coordinate. But destroying the nest organism triggers a response from the Wrath of Espandor's true master. The Tyranid Prime, having monitored the Space Marines' progress through the ship, recognizes the threat to its breeding ground, and it decides to eliminate that threat personally. The Prime's approach is heralded by a change in the swarm's behavior. Lesser organisms begin to pull back, clearing the field of battle. The screeching and chittering that has been a constant background noise throughout the mission suddenly stops. And then, from the darkness, the Prime emerges. The Tyranid Prime boss fight is a showcase of everything that makes these creatures so terrifying. The Prime is fast, incredibly fast for something so large, closing distance in seconds and delivering devastating melee attacks. Its scything talons can cleave through Space Marine armor with horrifying ease. But it's not just a brute force attacker. The Prime uses tactics, retreating when damaged to call in supporting swarms, using the environment to its advantage and adapting its attack patterns based on how the Space Marines respond. Defeating the Tyranid Prime requires coordination and precision. Solo operators must learn the Prime's attack patterns, recognizing the tells that signal its devastating special moves and dodging or parrying at exactly the right moment. Teams can divide responsibilities, with some members focusing on crowd control to handle the lesser organisms the Prime summons, while others concentrate fire on the alpha creature itself. Heavy weapons prove especially effective, with plasma guns and melta-weapons capable of burning through even the Prime's reinforced carapace. But even when the Tyranid Prime falls, the mission is not over. The death of such a powerful synapse creature sends shockwaves through the lesser organisms, momentarily disrupting their coordination. But the hive mind is vast and patient. Other synapse creatures will move to fill the void, and the swarm will reorganize. The Space Marines must use this window of confusion to complete their objectives and extract before the Tyranids recover and launch a coordinated counterattack. The extraction from the Wrath of Espandor is just as intense as the insertion. Fighting a running battle through corridors now fully alerted to their presence, the Space Marines must reach the extraction point before the ship's failing systems finally give out completely. Explosions rock the vessel as plasma conduits rupture and fuel cells detonate. Bulkheads collapse behind them, sealing off entire sections. And always, the Tyranids are pursuing, driven by the hive mind's insatiable hunger. The final moments aboard the Wrath of Espandor provide a glimpse into the Imperium's grim future. As the Space Marines board their Thunderhawk and pull away from the dying ship, they watch through the viewports as the vessel begins to break apart. But even in its death throes, the ship serves the Tyranid swarm. Spores and smaller organisms are being expelled into space, carried on solar winds and gravitational currents toward other potential host worlds. This is how the Tyranids spread, how they infect entire systems. One ship, one planet, one moon at a time, until entire sectors fall silent. The lore implications of the Wrath of Espandor mission extend far beyond a single derelict ship. This operation represents a microcosm of the greater Tyranid threat facing the Imperium. Hive Fleet Leviathan, the largest Tyranid incursion ever recorded, has been advancing along a broad front that threatens hundreds of worlds simultaneously. And unlike previous Hive fleets that could be countered and eventually driven back through concentrated military action, Leviathan's sheer size and multi-vector approach makes traditional defense strategies ineffective. The Tyranids are learning. Every encounter with Imperial forces provides them with new genetic material and tactical data. The hive mind absorbs the experiences of every organism that fights and dies, incorporating those lessons into future bioforms. The Tyranid Prime aboard the Wrath of Espandor may have been destroyed, but its memories, its experiences, its knowledge of how Space Marines fight, all of that has been transmitted back to the greater hive mind. The next Prime that faces Imperial forces will be better prepared, more dangerous, more adapted to counter Astartes tactics. This creates a terrifying escalation that the Imperium is struggling to counter. For every Tyranid organism destroyed, 10 more emerge from the bioships lurking in the void. For every planet successfully defended, 2 more fall silent, their populations consumed and processed into more biomatter to fuel the swarm. And traditional Imperial strategies of massed infantry and armored assaults prove increasingly ineffective against an enemy that can adapt faster than human military doctrine can evolve. The Space Marines, and particularly the Ultramarines chapter that features prominently in the Wrath of Espandor operation, represent humanity's best hope against the Tyranid threat. These superhuman warriors, enhanced with the gene seed of their Primarch and equipped with the finest weapons and armor the Imperium can produce, are capable of facing odds that would annihilate normal human forces. But even Space Marines have limits. Even Astartes can be overwhelmed by sufficient numbers or outmaneuvered by sufficiently adapted organisms. Lieutenant Titus, the player character in Space Marine 2, embodies the qualities that make the Ultramarines so effective against the Tyranid threat. He is tactical and adaptable, capable of assessing situations rapidly and adjusting strategies on the fly. He is courageous, willing to face impossible odds without hesitation. And he is experienced, having fought across dozens of war zones and survived encounters that killed brothers who stood beside him. These qualities are not just character traits, but survival necessities when facing the Tyranids. The Wrath of Espandor operation also highlights the importance of squad-based tactics in combating Tyranid infestations. While a solo Space Marine is formidable, a coordinated squad multiplies that effectiveness exponentially. Overlapping fields of fire ensure that no angle is left unguarded. Specialists can focus on their roles, with heavy weapons experts suppressing larger organisms while assault specialists engage in close combat. And the tactical flexibility of a squad allows for dynamic responses to changing battlefield conditions. The aftermath of the Wrath of Espandor mission leaves several questions unanswered, threads that could be explored in future content updates or campaign expansions. What happened to the ship's original crew in their final moments? Were there any survivors who managed to hide from the Tyranids long enough to be rescued? What intelligence was recovered from the ship's databanks that might help the Imperium better understand Hive Fleet Leviathan's strategic objectives? And perhaps most ominously, how many other Imperial ships have suffered the same fate, drifting through the void as mobile Tyranid breeding grounds? The environmental storytelling throughout the Wrath of Espandor is particularly effective at conveying the horror of a Tyranid infestation. Small details scattered throughout the ship tell stories without a single word of dialogue. A barricade constructed from furniture and equipment, behind which the bodies of crew members in various states of consumption can be found. A child's toy recovered from what was once family quarters. A reminder that Imperial Navy ships often house not just military personnel, but entire populations of support staff and their families. These quiet moments of environmental narrative hit harder than any exposition could. The technical aspects of the Wrath of Espandor mission showcase the improvements and additions that the Reclamation update brought to Space Marine 2. Ship's interior environments are richly detailed, with lighting that creates genuine tension and atmosphere. The sound design uses spatial audio to create a sense of threats lurking just out of sight. The enemy AI has been tuned to be more aggressive and coordinated, with tyrannid organisms working together in ways that feel genuinely intelligent rather than simply spawning in waves. The tyrannid bioforms encountered aboard the Wrath of Espandor each serve specific roles within the swarm's tactical doctrine. Termagants are the basic ranged attack organisms, equipped with living weapons that fire various projectiles from flesh-boring beetles to toxic spines. They're individually weak but dangerous in large numbers, capable of overwhelming targets through sustained fire. Hormagaunts are the melee shock troops, fast-moving organisms designed to close distance rapidly and tear enemies apart with scything claws. They're terrifying in the open, but can be funneled and controlled in tight corridors. Tyrannid warriors represent a massive escalation in threat level. These organisms stand 7 to 8 feet tall, are equipped with multiple weapons including ranged bioweapons and close combat implements, and possess enough intelligence to coordinate lesser organisms. Killing a Tyrannid warrior requires concentrated fire and tactical thinking, as they can shrug off wounds that would drop lesser creatures, and they often use termagants and hormagaunts as living shields. Their presence on the Wrath of Espandor indicates a well-established infestation with a mature command structure. The inclusion of the Tyrannid Prime as a boss encounter elevates the threat level to apocalyptic. In Warhammer 40k lore, Tyrannid Primes are rare and precious to the hive mind. They represent significant investments of biomatter and genetic refinement, and they're only deployed when the swarm needs to coordinate complex multi-stage operations. The fact that a Prime has claimed the Wrath of Espandor suggests the ship held strategic value to the Tyrannids, perhaps as a forward operating base, or as a testbed for new adaptive strategies. The Reclamation update that introduced the Wrath of Espandor operation also brought broader improvements to Space Marine 2's PV operations mode. New enemy variants, improved AI behaviors, expanded weapon customization options, and quality of life improvements all combined to make the experience more engaging and replayable. But the Wrath of Espandor stands out as a highlight, a mission that perfectly captures the claustrophobic horror of fighting Tyrannids in close quarters while providing intense action and meaningful challenge. The mission's replayability comes from multiple factors. Different difficulty settings dramatically alter the experience, with higher difficulties introducing more aggressive enemy behaviors and reduced resources. Different class loadouts allow for varied tactical approaches, from the range to suppression of the heavy class to the close combat devastation of the assault class. And the randomized nature of some enemy spawns means no two runs play out exactly the same way, maintaining tension even after multiple completions. Cosmetic rewards tied to completing the Wrath of Espandor operation provide additional motivation for repeated runs. Unique armor pieces, weapon skins, and color schemes allow players to customize their Space Marines while showing off their accomplishments. Some of these rewards are only obtainable by completing the mission on the highest difficulty settings, creating aspirational goals for skilled players. And the broader narrative progression of working through all the operations in sequence rewards players with a cohesive story about the Avarax system and the Tyrannid threat consuming it. The Wrath of Espandor also serves as an excellent introduction for players new to Warhammer 40k lore. The mission efficiently communicates core concepts about the Tyrannids, their threat to humanity, and why the Space Marines are necessary to combat them. Players don't need decades of lore knowledge to understand the stakes. the situation is immediately comprehensible. Aliens bad, ship infested, clean it out. But for lore enthusiasts, there are layers of references and details that reward deeper knowledge of the universe. The ship's name itself, Wrath of Espandor, carries significance in Warhammer 40k lore. Espandor is a system with historical ties to the Ultramarines chapter, and naming conventions in the Imperial Navy often honor significant worlds or battles. The fact that this ship bore such a name and has now fallen to the Tyranids represents not just a tactical loss, but a symbolic blow. It's a reminder that nowhere is truly safe, that even vessels bearing names of honor and glory can be corrupted and destroyed. The medical and research sections of the Wrath of Espandor provide some of the mission's most disturbing moments. Here, evidence suggests the crew attempted to study captured Tyranid organisms, perhaps hoping to develop some weapon or countermeasure. The results were predictably catastrophic. Containment failures led to organisms escaping and beginning the infestation from within. This mirrors similar incidents throughout Imperial history, where human arrogance and curiosity about the Xenos led to disaster. The Imperium xenophobia is not irrational paranoia, but hard-learned wisdom purchased with blood. The Bridge of the Wrath of Espandor tells its own story of last stands and failed resistance. This is where the ship's senior officers would have made their final stand, where orders were given to seal sections and vent others to vacuum in desperate attempts to slow the infestation. The captain's log, if recovered, reveals a timeline of escalating horror as the Tyranid spread through the ship faster than containment protocols could be implemented. The final entry is typically a declaration of failed duty and a prayer to the Emperor, followed by silence. One of the most effective horror elements aboard the Wrath of Espandor is the corruption of familiar spaces. The ship was designed by humans for humans, with corridors scaled for human movement and compartments laid out according to human logic. But the Tyranid infestation has warped these spaces into something alien and wrong. Passages are narrowed by organic growth. Doorways are sealed with resin-like substances. The geometry itself becomes hostile and disorienting, as if the ship is actively working against its former masters. The lighting throughout the Wrath of Espandor mission deserves special mention for its contribution to atmosphere. Emergency lighting flickers and fails, creating pools of shadow where anything could be lurking. The red glow of alarm systems paints everything in shades of blood and violence. And occasionally, the sickly bioluminescence of Tyranid organisms provides the only illumination, casting writhing shadows that move independently of any visible source. These lighting choices turn what could be straightforward corridors into nightmarish gauntlets of tension and dread. The audio design complements the visual horror perfectly. The ship's machine spirits, if they still function at all, cry out through damaged Vox systems with warnings and distress calls. Structural damage causes groans and shrieks of tortured metal that echo through empty chambers. And woven through it all are the alien sounds of the Tyranids themselves. The clicking of mandibles, the wet slithering of organisms moving through passages, the psychic scream of the hive mind that exists just below the threshold of human hearing but sets teeth on edge and raises primal fears. For players who engage with Space Marine 2's multiplayer operations, the Wrath of Espandor represents an excellent testing ground for squad coordination and communication. The tight corridors and sudden ambush punish teams that don't maintain proper spacing and mutual support. The variety of enemy types requires teams to adjust focus rapidly, calling out threats and coordinating fire. And the boss encounter with the Tyranid Prime demands role discipline, with specific team members handling specific responsibilities while maintaining overall situation awareness. The mission also rewards mastery of the game's combat systems. The parry mechanic, which allows Space Marines to deflect incoming melee attacks and create openings for counterattacks, is essential for surviving Tyranid rushes. The execution system, where finishing wounded enemies with brutal melee kills grants health regeneration and temporary buffs, becomes a risk-reward calculation when surrounded by swarms. And the class-specific abilities, from the Tactical Marine's Auspex scanner to reveal hidden enemies to the Bulwark's banner that provides defensive buffs, all find utility in the Wrath of Espandor's chaotic encounters. The lore surrounding Tyranid ship infestations in the broader Warhammer 40K universe provides context for what players experience aboard the Wrath of Espandor. The Tyranids don't simply attack ships for the sake of destruction. They're opportunistic and strategic in their approach to space warfare. A disabled or damaged vessel represents a bounty of biomass and genetic material to be harvested. And if the ship can be claimed relatively intact, it becomes a mobile base of operations that can be used to seed further infestations as it drifts through a system. This strategic thinking extends to how Tyranids approach the actual takeover of vessels. Initial boarding parties are small and stealthy, often involving lictors or other infiltrator organisms that can move undetected through a ship. These advanced scouts identify optimal breach points, locate concentrations of biomass, such as crew quarters and medical bays, and assess defensive capabilities. Once this reconnaissance is complete, larger boarding parties strike at vulnerable points, overwhelming defenses before they can properly organize. The speed with which Tyranids can claim a ship depends on numerous factors, including the vessel's size, crew complement, defensive readiness, and the resources the hive mind is willing to commit. A small transport with minimal security might fall within hours. A fully crewed warship with alert defenses could hold out for days or even weeks. But the outcome is rarely in doubt. Without external intervention, an infested ship is a doomed ship. The Tyranids simply cannot be eradicated once they've established a breeding presence. This grim reality informs Imperial Navy protocols for dealing with Tyranid threats. Standard doctrine calls for immediate quarantine of any vessel showing signs of infestation. The ship is to be isolated from all other fleet elements to prevent the infection from spreading. If there's any doubt about the infestation's extent, the preferred solution is complete destruction. An entire ship and its crew are considered acceptable losses if it prevents Tyranids from gaining a foothold in a system. It's brutal calculus, but in the face of the Tyranid threat, such hard choices are necessary. The Wrath of Espandor mission raises questions about why the ship wasn't immediately destroyed upon discovering the infestation. The most likely explanation is strategic necessity. Perhaps the ship contained valuable intelligence that couldn't be allowed to fall into Xenos' hands. Perhaps there were survivors whose lives justified the risk of a boarding action. Or perhaps, most cynically, the Imperium wanted to study the infestation in its advanced state to better understand Tyranid boarding tactics for future defensive planning. Whatever the reason, the decision to board rather than destroy led to the events players experience in the mission. The character development opportunities presented by the Wrath of Espandor operation, while limited by the mission structure, still allow for moments that reveal the personalities of the Space Marines involved. The stoic professionalism with which they approach such a nightmare scenario speaks to their training and indoctrination. The brutal efficiency they display in combat demonstrates why they're considered the Imperium's finest warriors. And the occasional moments of grim humor or acknowledgement of the odds they face humanizes them despite their superhuman capabilities. Lieutenant Titus himself is particularly interesting as a protagonist in these scenarios. His history includes both great triumphs and great trials. He has fought with honor and distinction, but has also faced accusations and censure. This complexity makes him more than just a generic Space Marine avatar. When Titus faces the horrors aboard the Wrath of Espandor, he does so not as an untested novice, but as a veteran who has seen darkness in many forms and emerged, if not unscathed, then at least unbowed and still willing to fight. The theological implications of the Tyranid threat, as experienced aboard the Wrath of Espandor, touch on one of Warhammer 40K's core philosophical questions. The Imperium is built on faith in the God Emperor and the belief that humanity has a divine destiny to rule the stars. But the Tyranids represent a challenge to that worldview. They're not just another alien species that can be defeated through superior tactics or technology. They're a force of nature, an evolutionary imperative that consumes everything in its path. They cannot be reasoned with or converted. They can only be fought with every resource available, and even then, victory is never assured. This existential dread permeates the Wrath of Espandor operation. Every space marine aboard that ship knows the statistical odds. They know how many worlds have fallen to the Tyranids. They know that even if they complete their mission successfully, it's a tiny victory in a war that spans entire sectors. But they fight anyway, because that's what they were created to do. The Emperor made them to be his warriors, to stand between humanity and the darkness, and they will fulfill that purpose until death claims them. The equipment and weapons players can utilize aboard the Wrath of Espandor reflect the Space Marine arsenal's diversity and lethality. The standard bolter, firing mass reactive explosive shells that detonate inside targets, is effective against most Tyranid organisms. The plasma gun, generating superheated plasma bolts, can burn through even heavy chitin armor. The meltagun, emitting focused microwave radiation, can reduce bioforms to ash at close range. Each weapon has optimal use cases, and part of the mission's challenge is choosing the right tool for each encounter. Melee weapons prove equally important in the confined spaces of the derelict ship. The chainsword, a symbol of space marine might, is effective against lighter organisms and can saw through Tyranid flesh with brutal efficiency. The power sword, wreathed in a disruption field, can cleave through heavier armor and strike down warrior organisms with clean cuts. And the thunder hammer, capable of delivering crushing blows with the weight of ceramite and the force of impact, can shatter even the thickest exoskeletons. Mastering these weapons is essential for survival. The armor systems that protect space marines are pushed to their limits aboard the Wrath of Espandor. Ceramite plating deflects claws and projectiles that would tear unarmored humans apart. Servo motors augment already superhuman strength, allowing marines to swing massive weapons with deadly precision. Auto senses filter toxins and provide targeting data. And the armor's power supply drives all these systems, while also supporting the Marines' own enhanced physiology. It's a masterwork of technology that turns already formidable warriors into living weapons platforms. But even this advanced armor has limits, and the Tyranids test those limits constantly. Acids secreted by some bioforms can eat through ceramite given time. Focused attacks on joint seals and vulnerable points can compromise protection. And sheer overwhelming force, multiple organisms attacking simultaneously, can breach even space marine armor through accumulated damage. This creates tension in every encounter. Players must manage their armor's integrity, falling back to recover when necessary rather than pushing forward recklessly. The mission's pacing is carefully structured to create a rhythm of tension and release. Quiet moments exploring empty corridors allow brief respites where players can catch their breath and reload weapons. These calm periods are deliberately placed between intense combat encounters, giving players time to process the chaos they just survived. But these quiet moments carry their own tension, because players know another attack is coming. They just don't know when or from where. This creates a constant state of anxious anticipation. The climactic confrontation with the Tyranid Prime represents the mission's emotional and mechanical peak. This isn't just another enemy to defeat, but a genuine boss encounter that tests everything the player has learned. The Prime's attack patterns must be studied and countered. Its abilities, from calling swarms to unleashing devastating melee combos, require specific responses. And defeating it requires not just mechanical skill, but also patience and discipline, waiting for openings rather than charging in recklessly. When the Tyranid Prime finally falls, there's a genuine sense of accomplishment. This was a creature that has destroyed armies, that has claimed an entire Imperial ship as its domain, and the Space Marines have brought it down. But the victory is tempered by reality. This was one prime on one ship. How many more are out there? How many other vessels have fallen to similar fates? The win is real but hollow in the greater context of the war. The extraction sequence following the prime's defeat is an adrenaline-fueled sprint through collapsing corridors and past increasingly desperate tyrannid organisms. The hive mind, sensing its prize slipping away, throws everything remaining at the Space Marines. Lesser organisms attack with suicidal abandon. Larger bioforms abandon tactical positions to try to cut off escape routes. And the ship itself is dying, systems failing catastrophically now that the prime's coordinating presence is gone, and the infestation's hold on the vessel's machine spirits weakens. Reaching the extraction point feels like a genuine escape rather than a simple mission conclusion. The Thunderhawk's arrival, its weapons blazing to clear the landing zone, represents salvation and safety after sustained horror. Boarding the transport and feeling it lift away from the dying ship provides emotional release. And watching the wrath of Espandor break apart through the viewport, consumed by explosions and venting atmosphere, drives home the destructive power of the tyrannid infestation and the price paid to stop it. The post-mission debrief, whether delivered through in-game dialogue or environmental storytelling in the Avarax System Hub, provides context for what the Space Marines accomplished. Intelligence gathered from the ship's databanks reveals enemy movement patterns and possible staging areas for future operations. Genetic samples recovered from destroyed bioforms allow Mechanicus tech priests to update their xenological databases. And the simple fact of stopping one infestation, one potential breeding ground, from spreading further through the system, represents a tactical victory, even if the strategic situation remains dire. The rewards for completing the Wrath of Espandor operation extend beyond in-game items and experience points. There's a sense of having experienced a genuine story, of having fought through overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. For players invested in Warhammer 40k lore, it's an opportunity to live out the fantasy of being a Space Marine, facing one of the Imperium's greatest threats. And for those new to the setting, it's a compelling introduction to what makes Warhammer 40k's universe so engaging and terrifying. The mission's place in the broader Space Marine 2 narrative connects it to the game's larger story about the defense of the Avarax system. The Wrath of Espandor wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a coordinated tyrannid assault targeting multiple strategic assets. The ship's fall represents one piece of a larger puzzle that Lieutenant Titus and his brothers are trying to solve. Why are the tyrannids focusing on this particular system? What strategic value does Avarax hold that justifies committing such resources? The answers may determine the fate of entire sectors. The relationship between the Ultramarines chapter and the tyrannid threat has special significance in Warhammer 40k lore. The Ultramarines were instrumental in halting Hive Fleet Behemoth at the Battle of Macragge, one of the first major tyrannid incursions into Imperial space. That battle cost the chapter dearly, including the life of their first captain and grievous injuries to chapter master Marnius Calgar. But the lessons learned at Macragge have shaped all subsequent Imperial responses to tyrannid invasions. The Ultramarines carry institutional knowledge about fighting the Great Devourer that makes them invaluable in operations like the Wrath of Espandor. This historical context adds weight to Titus's actions aboard the Derelict ship. He's not just following orders or completing another mission. He's continuing a legacy of Ultramarine resistance against the tyrannid threat. Every Xenos organism he destroys honors the sacrifice of battle brothers who fell at Macragge and countless other battlefields. And the intelligence he gathers contributes to the greater Imperium's understanding of how to fight an enemy that threatens to consume all human life in the galaxy. The Tyrannid Prime encountered aboard the Wrath of Espandor may itself carry genetic memory of previous encounters with Ultramarines. The hive mind never forgets, and every engagement is analyzed and incorporated into future bioform designs. If this prime or its progenitors faced Ultramarines before, it would have adapted its tactics specifically to counter their doctrines. This creates a terrifying arms race where both sides are constantly evolving their approaches based on previous encounters, with survival going to whoever adapts fastest. The environmental hazards aboard the Wrath of Espandor add another layer of challenge beyond enemy encounters. Failing life support systems mean areas of the ship have become vacuum or near vacuum. Power fluctuations cause lights to fail and blast doors to malfunction unpredictably. Damaged plasma conduits can explode without warning, bathing entire corridors in superheated energy. And the Tyranid infestation itself has created biological hazards, from toxic spores to acidic residue that can damage armor over time. Navigating these dangers while fighting Xenos requires constant awareness and quick thinking. The mission structure allows for both solo play and cooperative squads, but the experience differs significantly between the two modes. Solo players face a more methodical tactical challenge, where resource management and careful engagement are essential. Every shot must count, every parry must be timed perfectly, because there's no teammate to revive you if you fall. Cooperative squads experience something closer to the lore-accurate Space Marine experience, with overlapping fields of fire and coordinated tactics, allowing for more aggressive approaches. Both are valid and engaging, just different in feel and required skill sets. The replay value of the Wrath of Espandor operation comes partly from its multiple difficulty tiers. On easier settings, the mission serves as an introduction to fighting Tyranids in close quarters, teaching enemy patterns and proper tactical responses. Medium difficulties present a balanced challenge that tests competence without being punishing. And the highest difficulties transform the mission into a brutal test of mastery, where every mistake is potentially fatal and only perfect execution and optimal builds can prevail. This scalability ensures the mission remains relevant for players of all skill levels. The cosmetic customization options unlocked through Wrath of Espandor completion allow players to mark their achievements visibly. Battle-damaged armor pieces tell stories of close calls and desperate fights. Unique color schemes and chapter markings let players express their connection to specific Space Marine chapters or create custom successors. Weapon skins range from pristine newly forged tools to battle-scarred veterans of countless engagements. These cosmetic touches might seem minor, but contribute significantly to player investment and sense of progression. The broader implications of the Wrath of Espandor's fall extend beyond the Avarax system. Imperial Navy Command will need to account for the loss of this vessel in their strategic planning. The personnel aboard, from officers to crew to any civilians who called the ship home, represent losses that will need to be replaced from recruiting worlds already stretched thin by endless war. And the precedent it sets, another major vessel falling to Tyranid infestation, will inform future defensive protocols and possibly lead to more aggressive early detection and quarantine measures. The psychological impact on survivors of the Avarax campaign, including the Space Marines who boarded the Wrath of Espandor, is another consideration. While Space Marines are conditioned and trained to resist fear and trauma, they're not immune to the weight of what they witness. Boarding a ship where thousands died horrible deaths, where every corridor holds evidence of terror and suffering, leaves marks even on transhuman warriors. The Ultramarines chapter maintains chaplains specifically to help battle brothers process such experiences and maintain their mental readiness for future operations. The technical achievement represented by the Wrath of Espandor mission, in terms of game development, deserves recognition. Creating a space environment that feels authentically Imperial while also showing realistic, Tyranid corruption requires careful attention to visual design. The organic growth patterns, the way alien biomass integrates with Imperial architecture, the lighting and atmospheric effects that create tension without hindering gameplay, all demonstrate sophisticated art direction and technical execution. The mission succeeds both as interactive entertainment and as a showcase for what the game engine can achieve. The sound design team's contribution to the mission's success cannot be overstated. The ambient audio that creates atmosphere in quiet moments, the visceral impact sounds of weapons striking alien flesh, the terrifying screeches and roars of tyrannid organisms, and the subtle audio cues that signal approaching threats, all work together to create an immersive soundscape. Players who experience the mission with quality audio equipment, particularly headphones that provide accurate directional sound, gain both a tactical advantage through better threat awareness and a more emotionally impactful experience. The writing and narrative design that underpin the Wrath of Espandor operation show deep understanding of Warhammer 40K's tone and themes. The mission avoids the trap of trying to make everything grim and dark to the point of parody. Instead, it presents a genuine threat, shows realistic responses from trained military personnel, and allows moments of both triumph and tragedy to emerge organically from the scenario. This balanced approach makes the horror more effective because it feels earned rather than forced. The enemy AI programming for tyrannid organisms in this mission demonstrates significant thought about how these creatures would realistically fight. Lesser organisms swarm and overwhelm through numbers. Warrior-class bioforms hang back and coordinate while using lesser organisms as cannon fodder. The Tyrannid Prime shows genuine tactical intelligence, adapting its approach based on player actions and using the environment to its advantage. This creates encounters that feel dynamic and unpredictable rather than scripted or predictable. The level design of the Wrath of Espandor balances linearity with exploration. The main path through the ship is clear enough that players won't get lost or frustrated, but side passages and optional areas reward curious players with additional loot, lore documents, and environmental storytelling. This structure respects player time while also providing depth for those who want to fully explore and experience everything the mission offers. Finding hidden caches of ammunition or reading recovered data logs that fill in details about the crew's final hours adds layers to the experience. The integration of the Wrath of Espandor mission into Space Marine 2's progression systems encourage multiple playthroughs. Experience points earned contribute to overall level advancement, unlocking new abilities and equipment options. Class-specific challenges can be completed during the mission, providing additional rewards and encouraging players to try different playstyles. And the mission's role in the broader campaign structure means completing it is necessary for unlocking subsequent operations and advancing the overall narrative. The community response to the Wrath of Espandor operation since the Reclamation updates launch has been largely positive. Players appreciate the atmospheric horror, the intense combat encounters, and the lore-accurate depiction of both Space Marines and Tyrannids. The Tyrannid Prime boss fight in particular has been highlighted as a standout moment that captures the threat these creatures pose without feeling unfair or artificially difficult. And the mission's length, typically taking 30 to 45 minutes depending on difficulty and player skill, is seen as appropriate for the content density it offers. The modding community, where applicable and within the limits of the game's platform and structure, has shown interest in the Wrath of Espandor as a template. Custom missions inspired by it, potentially set on different ships or featuring different enemy types, could extend the game's lifespan and provide fresh experiences long after official content updates slow. The basic structure of boarding a compromised vessel and fighting through to complete objectives is flexible enough to support numerous variations while maintaining what makes the original mission engaging. The educational value of the Wrath of Espandor for players unfamiliar with Warhammer 40K lore should not be underestimated. The mission efficiently communicates key concepts about the Imperium, the Space Marines, and the Tyrannid threat without requiring players to read codices or watch lore videos. By experiencing these elements through gameplay, players gain intuitive understanding of what makes the setting unique and compelling. Many players report that experiencing missions like this one prompted them to explore more Warhammer 40,000 content, whether games, books, or the tabletop miniatures game itself. The representation of Space Marine capabilities in the Wrath of Espandor strikes a balance between power fantasy and vulnerability. Players feel powerful, capable of cutting through swarms of lesser organisms with contemptuous ease. But larger threats can quickly turn the tables, and being surrounded without proper positioning can lead to rapid defeat. This creates a power curve that feels appropriate to the lore where Space Marines are devastating against most threats but can still be overwhelmed by sufficient force or outmaneuvered by intelligent opponents. The mission's handling of ammunition and resource management adds tactical depth without becoming tedious. Ammo is limited enough that players can't simply hold down the trigger and expect to breeze through every encounter, but plentiful enough that running completely dry is rare if players are making reasonable tactical decisions. Armor repair stations appear at logical intervals, maintaining challenge while preventing frustration. And the execution system that rewards aggressive play with health recovery creates interesting risk-reward calculations during combat. The Tyranid infestation patterns shown aboard the Wrath of Espandor align with established lore about how these organisms claim and transform spaces. They prioritize areas with high concentrations of biomass to consume, creating nests in locations like crew quarters and medical bays. They establish presence near vital ship systems, not to operate them as humans would, but to feed on the energy they produce. And they create organic tunnel networks that bypass sealed blast doors and defensive choke points, gradually undermining any defensive strategy based on controlling corridors and compartments. The strategic value of ships like the Wrath of Espandor to both the Imperium and the Tyranids cannot be overstated. For the Imperium, such vessels are irreplaceable assets that take decades to construct and represent enormous investments of resources and expertise. Losing even one to enemy action is a significant blow. For the Tyranids, capturing a ship intact provides a mobile platform that can be used to spread infestation to new targets, while also offering a ready supply of consumable biomass and metal that can be broken down and incorporated into new bioforms. The chaplain or spiritual advisor presence, if mentioned or referenced in mission dialogue or environmental details, would be significant for Space Marines undertaking such an operation. The Imperium's warriors are indoctrinated with faith in the God Emperor, and that faith sustains them through horrors that would break ordinary humans. Aboard the Wrath of Espandor, surrounded by evidence of death and corruption, prayers to the Emperor and recitations of the Litany of Protection would provide both psychological comfort and genuine spiritual strength against the psychic predation of the hive mind. The technical challenges of clearing a Tyranid infestation from a ship without destroying the vessel entirely are immense. Standard procedure would be to purge each section with flame, using promethium to burn out every trace of organic matter. But aboard the Wrath of Espandor, the extent of infestation and the structural damage already sustained mean such thorough cleansing is impractical. The mission becomes one of intelligence gathering and denying the enemy assets rather than reclamation. This pragmatic approach to what can and cannot be saved reflects the Imperium's harsh calculus of acceptable losses. The implications for future content updates and potential expansions based on the success of the Wrath of Espandor mission are interesting to consider. Could we see additional derelict ship operations, each with unique environmental challenges and enemy configurations? Might future updates explore the Avarak system's fate more broadly, showing how the intelligence gathered from ships like the Wrath of Espandor influenced overall defensive strategy? The mission's structure and reception suggest it could serve as a template for ongoing content development. The relationship between the Wrath of Espandor operation and Space Marine 2's PvP modes is indirect but present. Skills developed fighting Tyranids in PvE translate to better combat awareness and mechanical execution that benefit players in competitive modes. Understanding spacing, timing parries, managing resources, and maintaining situational awareness all carry over. While the PvP experience focuses on Space Marine versus Space Marine combat with different dynamics than fighting Xenos, the core competencies remain relevant across both modes. The cinematographic approach to key moments during the Wrath of Espandor mission, particularly the Tyrannid Prime's introduction and defeat, shows careful attention to dramatic presentation. These aren't just gameplay sequences, but scripted moments designed to create emotional peaks. The camera work, the sound design, the temporary shifts in pacing all serve to make these moments memorable and impactful. When done well, as in this mission, such cinematic flourishes enhance rather than interrupt the gameplay experience. The diversity of Tyrannid bioforms encountered throughout the mission, while limited by what the game engine supports and what makes sense within a ship environment, still provides visual and mechanical variety. Each organism type looks distinct and behaves differently, requiring players to adjust tactics accordingly. This variety prevents the mission from becoming repetitive even during extended play sessions and ensures that players must remain alert and adaptive rather than falling into repetitive patterns. The ethical questions raised by the Imperium's treatment of ships like the Wrath of Espandor might not be explicitly addressed in the mission, but lurk in the background for thoughtful players. Was everyone aboard given a fair chance to evacuate? Were quarantine protocols implemented quickly enough to prevent unnecessary loss of life? Did command sacrifice this ship and its crew as part of some larger strategic calculation? Warhammer 40K's setting is built on moral ambiguity and the brutal necessities of endless war, and the Wrath of Espandor exemplifies those themes. The potential for the Wrath of Espandor mission to be used as an educational tool for new players learning Space Marine 2 systems is significant. It provides a contained environment where most of the game's core mechanics see use. Combat against various enemy types teaches engagement priorities and tactical positioning. Resource management becomes relevant without being overwhelming. And the structured progression through increasing challenges allows skills to develop naturally. Tutorial elements could be integrated seamlessly into this mission framework for maximum educational value without feeling artificial. The long-term impact of completing operations like the Wrath of Espandor on Lieutenant Titus's character arc and development provides narrative continuity across the game's content. Each mission adds to his experience, shapes his perspective, and influences how he approaches future challenges. The cumulative weight of all the horrors witnessed, all the battles fought, all the brothers lost along the way, creates a complete character rather than a static avatar. This character development, even in a game focused primarily on action, adds emotional resonance. The technical performance of the Wrath of Espandor mission across different gaming platforms has been generally strong, with most players reporting stable frame rates and minimal technical issues. The developers clearly optimized the mission well, balancing visual fidelity with performance to ensure a smooth experience regardless of hardware. This technical polish allows players to remain immersed in the experience rather than being pulled out by crashes, glitches, or performance hitches that would undermine the carefully crafted atmosphere. The music and score accompanying the Wrath of Espandor operation deserves recognition for supporting the mission's emotional journey. Quiet exploration moments feature minimal tension-building ambient tracks. Combat encounters escalate with driving, percussive scores that match the intensity of the action. And the Tyrannid Prime confrontation gets its own unique musical theme that combines threatening low tones with aggressive rhythms. This dynamic soundtrack adapts to gameplay while maintaining a cohesive sonic identity. The accessibility options available to players experiencing the Wrath of Espandor mission ensure a wide audience can engage with the content. Difficulty sliders allow players to tune challenge to their skill level and desired experience. Colorblind modes ensure visual information remains clear regardless of color perception. Subtitle options for all dialogue make the experience accessible to deaf or hard of hearing players. And control remapping allows players with different physical needs to configure inputs comfortably. These options demonstrate commitment to inclusive design. The legacy of the Wrath of Espandor within Space Marine 2's broader content ecosystem will likely be as a benchmark for quality and atmosphere in PvE operations. Future missions will be compared against it, and players will expect similar levels of environmental storytelling, combat intensity, and lore authenticity. This sets a high bar, but also establishes clear expectations that can guide development priorities for additional content. Meeting or exceeding the standards set by this mission will be crucial for maintaining player engagement and satisfaction. The final moments of the Wrath of Espandor mission, after the combat concludes and the Space Marines have extracted, offer a moment of reflection. The ship that once served the Imperium faithfully is gone, claimed by the Void and the Xenos. The crew that manned it died in terror and pain. But the intelligence gathered and the infestation stopped represent real victories in a war where every small success matters. This bittersweet ending captures the essence of Warhammer 40K, where triumph and tragedy are inseparable, and the best one can hope for is to delay the inevitable darkness for one more day. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. The Wrath of Espandor is one ship among countless thousands lost to that endless conflict. But for the Space Marines who boarded it, who fought through its corrupted corridors and brought down the tyrannid prime that claimed it, the mission represents something more. It's a testament to human courage in the face of overwhelming horror. It's proof that even when outnumbered and surrounded by Xenos filth, the Emperor's finest can still triumph. And it's a reminder that as long as even one Space Marine stands ready to fight, humanity's enemies will find no easy victories. For the Emperor, for the Imperium, for humanity itself, the war continues, and on ships like the Wrath of Espandor, that war is fought one bloody corridor at a time.